Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Once more into the breach, dear friends, once more.
That was interesting because it was a calm intro, but quite a hard clap.
Yeah. I'm mixing it up.
Yeah.
We have to keep it interesting during the election campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, or close the wall up with our English dead. You looking forward to picking up a rifle? You looking forward to defending the realm?
I don't want to contribute to the jokes on that because someone very rudely was like, oh, all of these old fogies thinking that they're in on the national service. They're way
You wouldn't be
past
doing it. Yeah, but you can still, at like a conceptual level,
yeah.
Would you die for England?
Depends on what we're fighting.
Laura, would you die for England?
No.
Would you die for Scotland?
No.
But she thought about it.
Yeah, there was more of a pause. Sean, how about you? Would you die for England?
No.
Yes, he said.
That's a yes.
That's really surprising.
That was a yes.
Out of all of them, out of the English, Welshman, and Scottish.
Sean, did you see the meme about how it's going to be voluntary, and so they could call the brigade from Northern Ireland the Ulster Volunteer Force?
Sick.
Bring them back. They never left. Ava Santini, how are you?
They did put a line out on Saturday, didn't they? Sorry, on Sunday, didn't they? That they'd acknowledged that this would be trickier to enforce in Northern Ireland. They had acknowledged that.
Well, it's tricky to enforce full stop. You know, the British Armed Forces operates on the idea of a professional soldier. It's not a conscript army. It's that soldiering is a profession, that you choose to do it. And so you spend your career in the armed forces, over which time you develop skills. And by the end of it, you're a very effective person. Mm. That is the model on which our armed forces has operated for decades now. The idea that we would just conscript people in to go, it's not how we work. It sort of runs against the theory of the British Army for a long time. Secondary to that, for the people that didn't pick up a rifle and weren't fighting, it doesn't work on a practical level for people. What's a volunteer firefighter? What's a volunteer? Yeah, I know you're having a heart attack, but actually we've got work experience Jimmy in, who's going to be doing the
We'd like Billy to have a go.
Yeah, so it's actually it's his first time with what's the fucking zapper, what's that called, defibrillator. Yeah, it's his first time, so we're just going to do some training. Just hang in there. We'll just run him through it, and then hopefully you'll still be alive by the end. The care sector, right? Do they want some sullen 18-year-old dragging his feet around the halls? No, they need trained carers. They don't need volunteers. I'm sure they're inundated with volunteer applications from people who do Duke of Edinburgh or who want to pad out their CV a little bit, which I'm sure they don't accept because it becomes more of a job teaching someone who's only in 1 day a week, 1 day a month, 2 days a month, what they can and can't do. They would want to finish the health and safety briefing by the time they finished their year of voluntary service. It doesn't work on a practical level. Full stop.
I quite like the idea that 700,000 18-year-olds all go, yeah, actually we'll join the army.
Like on a theoretical level, I'm not opposed to some form of national service. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good to bring people together from different backgrounds, different classes, different ages even. And actually, I would say probably, I think the demographic in the country that needs to get out of their bubble a little bit more is probably the boomers. I don't think it's 18-year-olds who interact with teachers, lecturers, their bosses at work, are out and living very unsiloed lifestyles. But I think there are mechanisms for fostering that, inter-demographic discussion. For example, you could look at citizens' assemblies as a way of doing that. That actually serves some form of democratic purpose.
Youth Parliament again, yeah?
Not the Youth Parliament. Definitely not the Youth Parliament, because that would just be a silo of 18-year-old nerds talking about politics. We don't want that.
We've got an army of Ed Campbells.
Yeah, no, you don't want that at all. You need to keep those people separate.
There should be compulsory Model UN.
Yeah, across the ages. But my point is, I don't like in practice, fostering some kind of sense of civic pride. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think, but saying, we're just going to conscript 18-year-olds, mandatory, volunteer work. How about if you want to help out the care sector, you could raise the wages of carers? How about if you wanted there to be more people working as paramedics, you could give them a pay rise, improve their working conditions? These are all ideas.
Well, hang on, let's pull back on that a little bit, because I quite like the idea that the government would have to open up places or placements in, with paramedics, with carers, with firefighters, because I think it would give a lot of 18-year-olds access to a career path that they probably wouldn't have, they might not have conceived that they would be able to join in the first place. I think there's no, I think that could be really good actually for parity, but it doesn't make sense to me that you wouldn't pay them for the work that they did. That doesn't tally with me. And what I also don't understand, going back to your over 50s point, was actually back in August last year, it was the pensions secretary who said that over 50s were economically inactive and they should take up jobs as delivery drivers rather than taking early retirement. So shouldn't you be opening up placements perhaps for them? Because actually they'd be very experienced, presumably, and they'd be quite helpful in a variety of sectors where we've got a shortfall of employees.
They all thought that they fought in the Second World War, so fucking off to the Donbass with you.
They did in their mind.
Yeah, exactly. So here you go. Have some trench warfare. Defend Kharkiv. But these mechanisms already exist as well, by the way. Like the cadets. There's literally, you go to a school. I have done actually multiple times recently. I've been given a couple of talks on like a Wednesday afternoon. They're all dressed up as toy soldiers running around pretending to shoot each other. These things already exist.
Oh, cadets.
Yeah. The cadet force.
I live by a cadets.
And there's the brownies and the guides. I know the brownies isn't exactly military training, but but there are these sort of volunteer organisations, aren't there, that already exist.
They're preparing the girl guides for the Donbass.
Yes, they are. They are.
You're right, the cadets. I quite like hearing them with their little drums walking up and down the...
Exactly.
I think it's quite sweet.
So that was one announcement. Swiftly followed, how do you like a triple lock? Do you like a triple lock? Would you prefer it to be quadruple locked?
Well, you're going to tell me that that's what they're doing.
That is what they're doing, Ava Santina. That is what they're doing. So because of... One of the key actual tax changes that the Conservative Party has made, right, is the freezing of the income tax thresholds. You get this effect called fiscal drag, where as people's pay, benefits, as their income increases, they creep towards the thresholds that previously they were under. They fall into a new tax bracket and start paying tax, right? And previously, in relation to pensions, that was triple locked, right? So it would either rise in line with inflation, wages, or 2.5%,
2.5, yeah.
2.5%, whichever of those three was highest. But they're now saying they're going triple lock plus or quadruple lock. I think they're probably workshopping which of the two they're going to go for. And they're saying that they will ensure always that whatever the state pension goes to, it will always fall below an income tax threshold. So it will always be tax exempt. It will never. So at the moment, at current rate of increase, I think it's something like 2027. If it kept, it's projected that it would they'd have to start paying tax on their pension. Rishi Sunak saying, no, not my dear pensioners. You will not pay tax. You will not have to pay tax on your pension. And I just thought it was quite a striking contrast. 18-year-olds to the trenches, pensioners, tax cuts. It seems quite naked. I suppose the pensioners are the only people that still vote for the Tory party, aren't they?
Well, they're very angry. I think this is probably in reaction to an interview that Rishi Sunak gave to Loose Women a couple of weeks ago, which, by the way, is...
You hate old people, she said.
Yeah, she did. You hate old people. You hate pensioners.
Which is funny.
But also, Loose Women is the primo spot if you're a politician.
Do you think?
You want to be on Loose Women or you want to be on This Morning. Those are I would say, that is like top level, top tier booking. And to go on there with all the old biddies watching it and be told that you hate pensioners, catastrophic.
Yeah.
So that's why I think this policy has come out of. But important about this policy, it's going to save pensioners on average £95 a year.
Nice.
What the fuck?
It's tidy. Yeah.
They've probably dropped that behind the sofa over the last couple of weeks. They've probably been shortchanged that.
That's how much a pensioner who overflowing with love for like a grandchild, that's how much they will stuff in an envelope. And be
Yeah.
like, don't tell your mum. It is a tax break for pensioners. And I don't want to, to be absolutely clear, I'm not on some like anti-pensioner thing. I think that Bean quote that's like, what do I care about in society? I want the pensioners to be warm and the beer to be cold. I think that's a pretty good basis for a well-run country. But it's just the difference between the two is quite striking, isn't it? That when it comes to the benefits that pensioners receive, they're triple locked, they're uprated, right? So inflation, wages, or that 2.5%. What do we have? Our student debt increases in line with inflation.
Well, we've actually got a triple lock on our pension, on our
Debt.
student loan.
Yeah.
Debt. Yeah. I think that's really good. One thing I really like about that is hang on, because my brain's a bit funny, so you have to correct me. It's either it rises in line with either RPI or CPI in the way that the triple lock doesn't.
Yeah, ours is
the higher one.
It's the higher one
Yeah.
that's like 2%, routinely sort of 2%, because it includes some goods that the other one doesn't include. I think it's RPI that's higher and CPI that's lower.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We're the higher one.
Yeah, the retail price index rather
Because
than the
that's the
consumer
one
price
that
index.
Mick Lynch is always arguing that public sector wages should go up by, but
Yeah.
actually it's dependent on the independent pay reviews, dependent on the CPI.
Mm.
But it's what's so funny about that is that the government acknowledge that our loans need to go up by RPI, but when it comes to public sector pay, they're like, well, why would it do that?
Yeah.
That one fluctuates way too much.
Yeah.
That's including way too many goods.
And look, I think increasingly age is the dividing line, right? In our politics, it's generational, and I don't want to end up in a world that does become antagonistic between the kind of the boomer class and everyone else who's younger than them. But if you govern like this, where you basically you have one cohort of voters that you say, right, we're not actually going to treat you as a part of the electorate that we want to incentivize to vote for us or treat well, or even to just be less cynical about it. The future of the country, right? Future generations, people that should be educated, set up to succeed in life because they will be, again, this is a cynical explanation for it, the tax base of the country, but you can make a more compelling argument that would simply go, we want our younger generations to inherit a better world and to make our country better. They are the future. But instead of saying that, you view them as a cohort that effectively are your electoral whipping boys. You do things to them to try and win the votes of a different group of people. So you interpret national. What are you going to do? We're going to militarily conscript 18-year-olds. The 18-year-olds will never vote for us anyway. But the reactionary boomer, the man who is reform curious, shall we say, he goes, "Oh yeah, actually very good." No, they do. They spend too much time watching Netflix, eating their avocados on toast. Put a rifle in his hands and make him do 10 press-ups. And so you're flirting with that. You're showing a bit of ankle to that guy. You're flirting with that guy. That essentially this younger group of people are not a cohort that you put out policy to incentivize them to vote for you. You just punish them. You just do things to them to try and get these other guys to vote for you, as opposed to pensioners, where you say, no, actually, all your benefits you get that those younger kids pay for, by the way, tax break.
But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that, because young people don't vote. They don't vote enough.
I think they're going to turn out this time.
Well,
We say it every time. I think they are going to turn out.
They really do need to turn out this time, because this is the perfect example of a strategist on both sides looking at demographics and going, well, they're not going to vote anyway, so we might as well appeal to the people who do actually apply for a postal vote. And what's concerning is that this 4th of July is right when universities are doing changeover time. So it means a lot of people who won't be registered to vote because they're moved out of their halls or they've moved out of their student houses or whatever. If you don't apply for a postal vote and you don't vote, this is your future.
Yeah. If you are a student, you can register to vote at your home address and your university address, and you can choose which one you vote at, which I would encourage you to do. But I'm I suspect and think that this generation is I think they are queuing up to give the Tories a fucking kicking. This generation that is about to vote for the first time, right? So let's just call it people aged 18 to 21, but you could probably go a little bit higher.
They'll be a bit older than that, yeah.
Higher than that. And you think about the journey that they've been on, right, in the last, let's call it 4 or 5 years, 2020 to now.
It's been so good.
Yeah. What a time, right? So COVID happens. You go into lockdown.
Some called that their national service.
They
actually.
did. Some did call it their national
Some
service.
did say that them staying inside for 2 years to look after the boomers and the older people was national service.
Yes, indeed. And obviously at the start, and there are obviously exemptions here when I talk about this, about people who were shielding, people who were vulnerable, not everyone, but I'm talking in generalities here. Generally, COVID presented much less of a risk to them as a cohort than it did to boomers, pensioners, for whom the complications of catching it could be very, very serious. And so you go, right, this doesn't really pose much of a threat to me, but I'm being asked to isolate, I'm being asked to lock down to protect those people. Okay, I will do it. And by the way, if people are sensitive about me couching it in those terms, that is exactly what happened once they rolled out the vaccine. Once the elderly were protected by the vaccine, young people, off you go, back to work, back to work, back to the pubs. We need you to be economically active again. We need you to start generating tax revenues for us. Off you go. You may remember you were sent out, but I didn't get my vaccine until months after I think it was tears and stuff like that. But I was out interacting with other people long before I was vaccinated again, as opposed to the elderly who got it first.
Well, I'm not even sure that strategy actually made sense. Should we not have vaccinated the people who were walking about?
Let's not do COVID match analysis right now. We don't have time to get into it.
Typical of this guy.
Yeah, I'm covering it up. So they do that. And obviously I think there were some parents who were acknowledged once we understood more about the disease. They turned a blind eye to their kids going out in the evenings or whatever and hanging out. But not everyone felt that way. Not everyone was allowed to do that. You then get the colossal GCSE exam results fuck up, courtesy of Gavin Williams. You get the colossal A-level results fuck up, again, from the Conservative government, where people didn't get a chance to sit their exams, got these random, either computer-generated or in some instances, teacher-assigned grades.
I thought that was sick, those grades. I loved that.
They never got the opportunity to actually be assessed, right? You go to university. I remember it was Manchester Uni. They literally put up metal fencing around the halls.
Sick.
They locked them in.
Cool.
Right? and all of this is going on, courtesy of the lockdown policies, the Conservative government. All of that happens. You take away Erasmus for a lot of these people.
Cool.
who would have loved to have studied abroad for a period of time. All of these things, over and over, you're just beating them, kicking them. And that's before we even start to talk about the housing market, which again is more than a podcast in and of itself. Let's just say it's not the best. And then you say to that person, you're about to get the opportunity to vote those fuckers out. What do you think they are going to do? The interesting thing is when you combine that with previous trends, particularly in relation to the Labour Party. When the Labour Party moves to the centre, you look at those traditional red wall seats, you see turnout decreasing, and you see Labour majorities decreasing. And it's interesting. I think it's a really interesting intersection of these two emotions, right? Which is hatred, genuine hatred for the governing party, but their number one challenger inspires apathy. And how those two things interact, I find really interesting.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that a lot of them are going to vote. Unless you're in a seat where, somewhere like Bristol Central, I think will be very interesting. Because you've got two arguably very good options for young people. If you actually lift the lid on that and then you actually look at the Greens policy on house building, you might change your mind.
This is the problem with the Greens. It's like you're reading through it and you're like, oh, that's interesting.
Very good.
Oh, taking the climate seriously. I might say some of this verges towards socialist politics.
Yeah.
And then you look at what the local Green Party does anywhere in the country, and they are the most fucking hardcore. I would call them jihadist NIMBYs.
Oh my God.
They are relentless in their opposition to house building.
Yeah. But they do it on like the worst At least like Lib Dems are like barefaced about it. They'll be like they'll just be like, listen, we actually just don't want your homes here. We actually just don't want it. Yep. Value of the house means a lot to us. The Greens are like, oh no, there's some wild moth here. So can't build here.
Look.
Then you'll be like, okay, but this is actually an ex-oil refinery. Like, yes, but some moles have settled here.
They like the oil.
Yeah.
It tastes good. Yeah, I think it's planning reform, isn't it, that just nukes all of these people. You change to a zoning-based system that's codified rather than permissive. You don't allow public consultation on every development. You allow public consultation when you're zoning, and you say, because all of these people will accept, by the way. You say, right, here is our town. I don't know, pick a town. Leamington Spa. Here's Leamington Spa. Leamington Spa needs 15,000 homes. Do we all agree? We all have children. They need somewhere to live. Does everyone in the council meeting agree that we need 15,000 homes? And 60%, 70% of people is, yeah, we do need to build more homes.
My darling has been priced out of Leamington Spa.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we're now going to discuss which areas are going to be zoned for development. And that will be a combination of residential, it will be a combination of retail, commercial. Here are the zones. How would you like to feed back on them? Well, actually, I don't think that one should go there. I think this one should go there. Yes, but you do accept that we do need a certain amount of... Yes, I do accept that. Okay, well, it's going to have to go somewhere. Maybe it's smaller here and we'll do a bit over here as well. And once that's in writing, once that's set, if the building conforms to the codified regulations, i.e. materials that you can use so that it's in keeping with the local area, quality of the design, sustainability, environmentally friendly factors, all of that sort of stuff, they can no longer stop it. A train is in motion. A house-shaped train is heading towards the field next to their house, and they cannot fucking stop it. Mm-hmm. Then Greens can't be NIMBYs anymore, and we can willingly vote for them. Happy, happy days, I think. But it's probably the Labour Party that's going to introduce those planning reforms.
Yeah.
You mentioned Bristol Central.
I did.
It's funny because you were talking to someone at the weekend about Bristol Central, weren't you? A fairly high-profile female.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, Carol, yeah.
She mentioned Bristol Central.
She did mention Bristol Central
in relation to her campaign about tactical voting. Maybe if we'll listen to a clip of the interview, Ava, and then you can talk about your conversation with her. How does that sound?
Go on then.
Roll the clip.
In Henley and Tame, and at the moment, the polling says the Conservative would have 37% of the vote. I think Lib Dems were 30 and Labour was 21. So we would, in that circumstance, say vote Lib Dem rather than split the vote between other anti-Tory parties, if you like. Now, if you take the 2019 election voting and you said that the Conservatives and those who voted for sort of right-wing, whether it was UKIP or whoever, voted the same way, and everybody who didn't vote for them, who voted Labour, Lib Dem, Green, whatever it might be, or Independent, if all of those people had voted tactically, instead of the Conservatives having 365 or whatever they had, because they have many fewer now, don't they? At the time of the election, they would have ended up with 3 members of Parliament, not 360 something. They would have had just 3. That's the power of tactical voting. And I am going for a target of them only getting 35 members of Parliament.
35.
35.
Wow.
A year ago I said 85 and everyone, oh, you're being ridiculous, you're this, that and the other. And quite a lot of polling is predicting that without taking tactical voting into account. So I'm going for 35.
Ava, so that was Carol Vorderman talking about tactical voting in the context of this general election.
So she's got this Stop the Tories, and it is a way of you can go online basically and you can find out which party you can vote for that won't split the vote. So you go for so you might pick a constituency where, I don't know, Lib Dems are winning here. For example, somewhere like Esher in Surrey, that could go Lib Dem from Tory. They would advise you vote for them rather than vote for Labour. Give them a big kicking.
Do you think it's going to be a force in this election?
I was quite shocked by how many people have been on the website. She said just this election cycle has been about 1 million people who've looked at it. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and if that's in the context of the local elections, now that we're in a general,
People have got more buy-in, haven't they?
a lot more people are paying attention.
Yeah. I think we do talk about it. There's a few holes in it because obviously what she argues is she just wants to get them out and then she will hold the Labour government to account. But of course, the big hole in this plan is that you're giving Keir Starmer quite an easy ride, and so he doesn't actually have to put down some policies that might upset one group and incentivise another. I mean, particularly, we've just spent ages talking about young people here. I don't think that the Labour Party have really offered anything. I did put that to her and she said that they'd actually offered votes to 16, 17, 18-year-olds. But when I talk about young people, I really mean under 35s. I don't mean, actually even under 40s. I don't mean young people, you know? I mean people who are really not on the housing ladder. Yeah. And then the other thing I think that's interesting actually about Keir Starmer, this is a good segue into Gaza. He hasn't had to say very much about Palestine the last couple of days. And I do think that this is going to really come back to bite Labour, what he had to say in October.
Yes. So he gives a speech yesterday, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Down south.
Lancing.
Yes. And there was a question at the end of the speech about Netanyahu and about Rafah. And I can't remember who it was that asked him, but a journo says, I think we could probably just listen to it, actually. I don't need to do a play-by-play. Should we listen to it?
This is so funny because now we're just adding more and more clips to like
for
Laura and
Sean's put in. Yeah, so I won't bother talking about it. I'll just let them do the edit.
Yeah.
Let's have a listen.
Look, 2 months from now, you might be Prime Minister, the man making those difficult calls. Well, overnight, there are reports of dozens of people killed or injured at a refugee camp in Rafah because of blasts which authorities in Gaza say are down to Israeli airstrikes. As UK Prime Minister, what would you be saying right now to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Stop. Those scenes, those reports are horrifying. And, you know, what makes it worse is that this was a safe zone with women and children in it and families that already fled a number of times. It is horrifying to see that. I've been saying for some time that the Rafah offensive should not take place. And what you saw there was the consequences, the inevitable consequences of that offensive. It should not take place. And we should join with our allies to ensure that it doesn't take place. There needs to be a ceasefire. It needs to be in place straight away. And that means to provide the space for hostages to come out, for humanitarian aid to desperately get in, and to provide a foot in the door for the process, the political process, that's the only long-term way through this, to a two-state solution, which includes in the process the recognition of Palestine as a viable state alongside a safe and secure Israel. So I'd be very clear about this. I was shocked by what I saw overnight. I think any human being would be shocked by what they saw overnight. It's got to stop.
And so he says, as you heard there, stop. Now that, dear listener, you will notice is quite strikingly different to what he was saying at the beginning of the war. And I'm interested about what the red lines are here. What is it that's changed that means he is calling for an immediate ceasefire? What is it? Is it the scale of the death and destruction? Because that's feasible. That could be an answer. That initially he was happy with some form of vengeful retribution, destruction of Hamas, kill a few civilians, happy days. But it's obviously gone on something much bigger, more than 100,000 people killed and maimed in Gaza now. Is it the fact that we're talking about the bombing of refugees in their own country? These people now in Rafah having been displaced from elsewhere in Gaza and are now living in tents. So are we saying they're not fair game for the Israeli attack? Is it, and this would be the cynical interpretation, that Labour is noticing in the context of local election results that electorally their position on Gaza is hurting them, and so they're adjusting it? What do you think the red line is for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party that's led to him going from Israel has the right to defend itself when asked about collective punishment to What do you say to Benjamin Netanyahu now? Stop. What's the difference?
Can I pose something not in that option list?
Yes.
I think that Starmer suffers from something that a lot of politicians suffer from, which is he doesn't realise that when he's talking to one group, like one radio station, that actually a lot of other people are listening to that. And I think that I genuinely don't think thinks he said anything wrong when he said that Israel has the right to cut off water, cut off power.
Yeah, so this is, we should just be very clear about this because they are very particular about it, right? Nick Ferrari asked Keir Starmer a question.
Should we play the clip?
Yeah, and crucially, we'll play the full clip.
Yeah.
We'll play the full clip.
I'm very clear. Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation. Obviously, everything should be done within international law, but I don't want to step away from the sort of core principles that Israel has a right to defend herself and Hamas bears responsibility for these terrorist acts. And I would call on all responsible states, particularly Middle East responsible states, to call this out for what it is and to stand with the world in utterly condemning these actions by Hamas.
Okay, so Starmer's argument is that when I said Israel has a right to defend itself, I was referring to my answer to the previous question. I was not answering when you said, does Israel have the right to cut off water and electricity? And I said, yes, she has that right, which again is also slightly weird to say, why is Israel her? But I mean,
that provoked a lot of discourse at the time as well, because a lot of people were like, he is correct.
What did he say?
She's a country.
Okay.
I just don't think it just didn't need to happen.
No. Anyway, so he says, when I say she has the right to defend herself, I'm talking about I'm ignoring the thing you've just asked me, Nick Ferrari. When you said, does Israel have the right to cut? And I say, yes, she has that right. I was actually referring to the previous thing. Now, obviously, people can listen to that and form their own conclusions, make up their own minds.
And a lot of people have said that is potentially doubling down.
Yes. And why were we talking about? Why did we play the clip? I've lost my train of thought, Ava Santina.
Because I was saying that is going to haunt him. Because,
yes. Yeah. No. And absolutely, it will. And people will say, and that's why I think the interesting point is, what was the red line that's been crossed in between there?
I don't think there is a red line. You see, that's the point that I'm trying to make. I genuinely think that they think people will forget about it, or people have forgotten about it. I think they think that, oh no, it's fine. We were talking on LBC. Young people don't listen to LBC. This is absolutely fine. We've gotten away with that. I don't really know what the strategy should be for them now. I mean, it's dependent on what they actually want to do when they get into government with Israel Gaza. But to me, it seems like he needs to do, I totally fucked it on that interview. It was in a high pressure situation. I said the wrong thing. That is not how I felt. And correct the record rather than trying to keep smoothing it over, because I feel like he's really papering over the cracks and hoping that everyone gets convinced that he didn't mean it without actually having to acknowledge he didn't mean that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how the Labour Party responds today to the SNP's call to recognise the Palestinian state, and also some of his backbenchers as well. I saw Andrew Gwynn being one who's calling for the Labour Party to recognise Palestine as a state when elected. So be interesting to see.
Because also the other thing was, when they had the ceasefire vote, that was an SNP Opposition Day motion, right? And okay, let me just very briefly say that what the Labour Party argue, when an opposition party puts down a motion, typically other parties don't vote on that motion. They don't vote for it, okay? It's parliamentary procedure. Very boring. What Starmer and the front bench failed to realise was that no one in the public cares about parliamentary procedure, that you don't vote on another opposition motion. All they heard or read were the headlines that said Keir Starmer sacks his front bench for voting for a ceasefire in Gaza. That's all they heard. They didn't get the minutiae of it at all. And so there's quite a lot of talk, which is Keir Starmer not only said that Israel had the right to cut off power, but I'm going to sack frontbenchers if they vote for a ceasefire. That's what's in people's consciousness.
And he's trying to walk it back now. Cool. Well, I think that's probably the pod. Ava.
Yeah, nice one.
I think let's draw a line. Then we've given Ava, we've given Laura and Sean enough to do. So
We have.
all right, perfect.
Nice one.
See you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.